This is the Content Marketing Podcast, episode number 138, 7 Habits of Highly Effective Social Content Marketers. Hello and welcome to the Content Marketing Podcast. This is the show where we help you attract and retain business through the power of quality content. I'm your host, Rachel Parker of Resonance Content Marketing, and today is September 3rd, 2015. Hello, and thank you for joining us today. Happy to have you. Just a reminder, the Content Marketing Podcast is live on iTunes and on Stitcher. So if you're listening to this episode on the blog, you can click on over and subscribe. And of course, if you use a different app for your podcast listening pleasure, we also have an RSS feed, and I will provide that link in the blog post. Last week, we welcomed a very special guest whom I've been dying to have on this show. Jeffrey Hazlett stopped by to share some gems of wisdom from his new book, Think Big, Act Bigger. And by the way, that book is due out real soon now, September 12th, and is available for pre-order on Amazon. Anyway, if you happen to miss that episode, you might want to click on over and check out our interview with Jeff before you pick up his book. Feel free to check it out on iTunes or Stitcher or via the RSS feed. This week, we're focusing on social media, specifically on the 7 habits of content marketers who absolutely rock Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and all those social networks. But first, it's time to check in with our news feed for this week's rundown of news you can use. Well, it looks like our friends over at Instagram are thinking outside the box, or to be specific, outside the square box. If Instagram is part of your content marketing strategy, and I highly recommend that you at least consider it, this is big news. Instagram is indeed breaking out of that square requirement for all images and now supports both portrait and landscape oriented images. So this is great for us, especially if you share custom images on Instagram, if you share like little factographics or, custom images that you create rather than a photo. This is really, really handy, and it's not going to force us to have to crop those to fit into that square format. So interesting news out of Instagram. Okay, more interesting news out of SlideShare. Now, you may recall that LinkedIn purchased SlideShare, and just a few weeks ago, it rebranded as LinkedIn SlideShare. So now we have to call it LinkedIn SlideShare. Anyway, whatever you call it, these folks introduced a new feature just this week. So say you are looking at a SlideShare and you run across a single slide that you really want to hang on to. Maybe it's a great chart, some great information, a great quote, a great graphic, and you don't necessarily want to save the whole presentation, the whole slideshow. You just want that one slide to be able to go back to. Well, SlideShare, or rather LinkedIn SlideShare, now allows you to clip that single slide and save it into what they call your clipboard, kind of like your own personal library, and it will save in that location, and you can either save it for your own purposes or share it on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and those other networks, which is pretty handy because, especially from our perspective of content marketers, users, it may be cumbersome for them to share to save an entire presentation, but they can clip out and share the juiciest bits and share that with their network. So it makes it really easy for those users to share just the juiciest bits of our content. And then also as part of our work as content marketers, we do a lot of research, right? This is great for research because if you're looking through a presentation and find a couple of really great charts that you want to refer back to, it lets you clip out that information and refer to it later. So very interesting new feature from our friends at LinkedIn SlideShare. Okay, speaking of LinkedIn, I do want to mention that LinkedIn has just released a new ebook. It's called 10 Ways to Drive Killer Results with Sponsored Updates. And, when I first saw this, I was like, oh, okay, this is a sales pitch for doing these paid updates, which, by the way, on LinkedIn are quite expensive. But it's actually a very good resource. It contains some very good information about the difference between your page followers and your target audience. So the difference between people who would be seeing your regular your regular posts from your company page and the ones who would be seeing a sponsored post. And it talks about how to tailor your message accordingly. And there's actually some very good research in there. Again, the new ebook is called 10 Ways to Drive Killer Results with Sponsored Updates. I don't have the URL off the top of my head right now, but I will be sure to include that in the blog post for this episode. So you can go snag yourself a free copy and benefit from that information. Okay, our content hit of the week is, speaking of research, it's called Consumer Survey Reveals the Efficacy of inbound versus outbound. And this is written by Kelsey Liebert over on the Moz blog. Our friends at Moz, M-O-Z, they are the SEO experts, always producing great content. Anyway, this post contains the results of a survey. Oh my gosh, what is wrong with my mouth today? Results of a survey conducted by Moz and Fractal, Fractl. And it was all about how effective inbound methods are, so things like search, social media, content marketing, versus outbound, specifically advertising. And the reason I wanted to share this with you is lately I've been talking to a lot of marketers who say things like, Rachel, I get it. I get the power of blogging. I get the power of, social media and email content and all this stuff. But my CEO just does not see the value in it. They are attached to their old methods. They say, well, advertising still works for us. Let's keep doing that. So if that sounds familiar, if that sounds painfully familiar, this research, the results of this research will give you some really good ammunition the next time you get into one of those conversations. So highly recommended, and I will provide the link in the blog post for this episode. Okay, that's it for this week's update. If you stumble across something you think might be of interest to your fellow content marketers, please shoot it on over to us so that we can share. Now it's time for this week's Spotlight segment, 7 Habits of Highly Effective Social Content Marketers. Recently I was looking back at some of my own previous content and looking at the topics we've covered across the months and, even across the years at this point. And I really wanted to look at what topics got the most conversation started and what got people really engaged and asking good questions and what people really wanted to know more about. So that's kind of my focus this month. It's a bit of a potpourri on topics that people have expressed that they really want to know more about. And one of those is definitely social media. So I put together these 7 habits of highly effective social content marketers. Now notice I did not say social media marketers. We are focusing on the content. There's a ton of advice out there on, best times and places to publish and how to use those promoted posts and how to get more followers, et cetera, et cetera. All that is, I'm sure much of that is wonderful advice. I don't want to say all of it because, there are hacks out there. But anyway, today I really wanted to focus on social content marketing. So social media as a piece of that overall content marketing puzzle. So without further ado, here are my 7 habits of highly effective social content marketers. Number 1, highly effective social content marketers are strategic. Okay, they don't just sit down every day and go, okay, what am I going to share on social media today? They are very specific. They are very strategic, especially when it comes to their topics. They're not getting out there and just sharing what people like. I've talked to people who say, whenever I put inspirational quotes out there, people always like it. So I started sharing inspirational quotes each and every day. No, please stop. So to be a highly effective social content marketer, you have to be strategic in selecting those topics that really represent you well and that speak to the needs and the pain points of your audience. You've really got to know that audience very well. That's something that I drive home constantly. Really get into their heads and figure out what they're interested in, what is going to help them solve their problems, what is going to help them, if you're in B2B, do their jobs better, or on the B2C side, what is going to make their lives better. And highly effective social content marketers are also strategic about their locations, about what they share on Facebook versus LinkedIn versus Twitter. There might be some content that is more appropriate for one than for the other, depending on how you have set up your brand on those different sites. So be strategic, decide in advance which topics you're going to cover and how you're going to cover them. Put together an editorial calendar. Things like this are going to help you stay on that strategic path, and that is going to help you be a highly effective social content marketer. Number 2, highly effective social content marketers practice the 80-20 rule. And the 80-20 rule is 80% of the content that you share should come from other sources, and 20% should be your own. Now, I've also heard it expressed the 70-20-10 rule, which is 70% from other sources, 20% your own content, so your own content marketing, and then 10% can be sales, promotional in nature. However you want to slice and dice it, content marketers know they can't be out there just sharing their own stuff or talking about, certainly can't be out there with a sales message every single day, but they also can't be out there every day talking about themselves. They can't be talking about, every single post can't be, here's what's going on with us. Here's what the trade show that we're at. It can't be 24/7. They have to strike a balance between sharing other people's content, that third-party content, and sharing their own. So in order to be a highly effective social content marketer, do keep in mind that most of the time you need to be sharing content from other sources, and that's going to help to grow your thought leadership and your standing as a thought expert in your field. Number 3, highly effective social content marketers make good use of their time. And one of the things that they do is they schedule their posts in advance. And it is so critical to be able to do that, because that is going to be such a time saver. That way you're not saying, I've got to post on Facebook today. What time am I going to be able to do that? Is that going to be the right time when all my followers are on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So scheduling in advance lets you, number 1, benefit from those times when most of your followers are online, and apps like Facebook Insights will be able to tell you that. There's also an app called, I want to say it's called Twiriad. I should know, I go there all the time. Yes, Twiriad. It tells you when most of your Twitter followers are online, so you can schedule your post during those specific times. And that way, by scheduling in advance, we can make sure that our content hits those critical times when most of our audience is there and likely to be listening. And it's a good idea to just get all that done anyway. You get in the zone, you get your content, you know how you're going to share it, and you can just knock out a whole week's worth of posts. Now, is that all you do for the week? Absolutely not. You still need to be out there listening to what's going on, monitoring comments, monitoring conversations that have to do with your audience and, of course, with your brand. But do take advantage of the tools you have available to schedule those posts in advance, and that will help make good use of your time. Number 4, highly effective social content marketers stay current every day. Keep your eyes open. Know what's going on in the world. And this especially helps us to avoid embarrassments. I just mentioned in number 3, yes, we do schedule posts in advance, but we need to keep up with what's going on in the world just to make sure that what we have scheduled in advance doesn't run counter to that and possibly create some uncomfortable situations. For example, there's a TV show here in the States called Sleepy Hollow, and it's based on the legend of the Headless Horseman, and it's based on the Washington Irving story, and it's really cool show, actually. I really like it. But since it is about the headless horseman who runs around lopping people's heads off, they use that hashtag heads will roll in a lot of their tweets. And it's a lot of fun, kind of goofy, quasi sci-fi fantasy type of thing. Well, it just so happens they had put out a tweet about an upcoming episode with the hashtag heads will roll, and I almost hate to say this, but that happened to turn out to come out on the same day that ISIS beheaded a journalist over in Iran, and that was a very unfortunate, completely unintentional, but a very unfortunate convergence of those two different topics. So my point here is we need to keep our heads up. We need to watch what's going on in the world, watch what hashtags are being used. If something, we just want to avoid any embarrassments or any unfortunate associations. And we also need to stay current just to, to be able to be thought leaders for our audience, to be able to speak to the current issues of the day and to relate those to what is on their minds. So make sure that you have a system for staying current, whether that's, creating a dashboard of certain news sources or creating lists in Twitter that you follow, but make sure you keep up with what's going on. Number 5, highly effective social content marketers speak in their audience's language. Believe it or not, this is a mistake I see so frequently. It's almost insane. I see brands out there, they say, oh yeah, we're doing a lot on social media. And you look at what they're sharing out there, and it is the same officious, stilted language that you see in their press releases or in their marketing materials. And they wonder why they're not getting any engagement. It's like, well, because you're out there talking, sounding like a press release, sounding like a mouthpiece for this brand. You're sounding like a bullhorn, or sounding like something that was approved by 5 different committees, which it probably was. But as content marketers, we need to understand our audience, understand their language, and speak to them in a way that resonates with them. That we still want to represent our brands. We don't want to be overly conversational if that's not appropriate, but we do need to speak in a conversational tone. We need to be welcoming. We need to be approachable. We don't want to sound like something that's flown down from the 52nd story of the high-rise building. We need to understand their language. We can't throw a bunch of acronyms at them. Even if they do understand it, we need to speak in plain, simple English, or whatever your language of choice is, and make sure that we are being conversational in everything that we put out. Number 6, highly effective social content marketers keep a finger on the pulse of their audiences. Now, we talked about how we need to keep up with what's going on in the world, but we also need to keep up with what's going on with our audiences. And we can do that through several methods. We can do surveys, we can do polls, we can do open questions. We can go out there on our various social networks and just post questions for people to answer. And, you might want to one thing that I like to do is create a list on Twitter of your power followers, people who are part of your audience who may or may not be customers, but who really represent that person whom you want to be reaching, and keep up with them, see what they're talking about, see what issues are on their mind. Because those can change from year to year and even from month to month. So we've got to keep our finger on the pulse of what is going on with those folks. And finally, number 7, highly effective content marketers review their results, and they use those results to learn for the future strategies. So they are not only looking at the Facebook insights, at the numbers from their Twitter and their LinkedIn, but they're using that information. They're saying, oh, wow, this photo performed really well, or people really responded well to this tweet. What can we learn from that? And the same goes with Google Analytics for your blog. It's not specifically social media, but look at what people are responding to and what people are not responding to. You will start to see patterns emerge if you look at these results week to week and month to month. Make sure you're using that information to inform your posts in the future, and you will watch a tremendous difference in your engagement rates. Okay, so that is my quick and dirty take on these 7 habits of highly effective social content marketers. If you have any questions or if you have any highly effective habits that you want to share, I would love to hear from you, and I will give that contact info at the end of the podcast. Now it's time for our content marketing tip of the week. For today's tip, I want to talk about customizing your social media messages. One question that I get very frequently when we talk about social media is people ask me, is it okay to share the same content across Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn? If I have a post, for example, if there is there's an article on Forbes that I want to share with my audience, is it okay to post to those other networks at the same time on the same day? And it is. It is perfectly okay to share the same content across those different networks, but what we need to be aware of is the need to customize your message. For example, Twitter. Obviously, you have 140 characters or less to get your tweet out there, and Twitter tends to be very almost like a news feed. It is just the facts, ma'am. So usually, when I share an article on Twitter, I just share the exact article title, at the link, and maybe one hashtag, and that'll be it. So Twitter, very straightforward, very, like I said, just the facts. Now, LinkedIn, we need to remember that LinkedIn does not use hashtags, and LinkedIn is a bit more of a business audience. So while we have a little bit more in terms of character count, we need to be aware that we need to focus on the business aspects of whatever it is we're sharing. And then Facebook, for its part, is they do use hashtags, so hashtags need to go back in, but it's a little bit more chatty, a little more conversational. So each social network has its own norms and different things that people respond to. And by tailoring your message to each social networks, you will notice that you will get much better engagement and much more activity. Okay, campers, that is it for me today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. If you like what you've heard, please feel free to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or via our RSS feed. And if you really like what you've heard, please leave us a quick review on iTunes. I would so appreciate that, and I'm so grateful to everyone who has left us reviews so far. For more information about content marketing, you're welcome to visit our website at resonancecontent.com, where you'll also find links to our pages on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and other social networks. I also want to invite you to check out our monthly webinar series. That is on the 4th Thursday of the month. So we started off Wednesdays. We're trying Thursdays for a while. See how that works. This month will be Amp Up, Top 3 Ways to Boost Your Marketing with Content, which will be on Thursday, September 24th at 12 p.m. U.S. Central Time. The registration page is not up yet, so for now I'm going to ask you to save the date and keep an eye out for that information, which will be coming soon. As always, I like to leave you with a quote, and today's comes from Jay Baer. Now, Jay Baer is a tremendous thought leader in the content marketing world, and actually was gracious enough to appear on this podcast. And one of the quotes that he shared when we had our conversation for this podcast is something that really stuck with me, and I want to share that with you today. Jay said, quote, "Make your marketing so useful that people would pay you for it." Unquote. And for me, that's become kind of a litmus test almost when I put together a blog post, when I put together a presentation or a video. I step back and think, okay, is this useful enough that someone would pay for it? And it really inspires me to raise the bar in what I'm doing. So today I give that to you to use as you see fit. Again, this is Rachel Parker with Resonance Content Marketing. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you again next week. Take care.